everyone, welcome back to Let's Talk. My name is John, and today here on the channel, we're going to be talking about The Prophecy 1, 2, and 3, and its new 4K Blu-ray box set that just came out from Vinegar Syndrome. So The Prophecy actually is a 5-film series that came out. First started in 1995 with The Prophecy, then 1998 it had The Prophecy 2, in 2000 they had The Prophecy 3, and then after that they had 2 more direct-to-video sequels that didn't star Christopher Walken. And Christopher Walken really is the glue that holds these original 3 movies together. The first one came out in 1995, this is the only one that was ever released in theaters, and this one had the most stacked cast of all of them. Not only does it have Christopher Walken in it, but it also features Virginia Madsen, really at the height of her powers in the 1990s, Elias Cotis, and this is, again, at the height of his powers. This is the same year as Crash came out. This is just a few years after the Ninja Turtles movies. He was in Look Who's Talking Too. So this guy was popping up all over the place throughout the 1990s, but in this movie, he wears a really, really noticeable wig. And the movie also features Eric Stoltz. Again, another guy really riding high, coming off the 1980s when he was replaced in Back to the Future, but in 1995, 1 year after Pulp Fiction, which is probably one of his other most famous roles.
Heroin, it's coming back in a big fucking way.
So this movie really caught a lot of people at the right time and attracted a lot of talent, and it's a pretty straightforward thriller horror film. It's telling the story of the Civil War taking place in heaven between the angels and the archangels. Now, I'm not a very religious person, so I don't know any of these kind of tales going into this movie. It's talking a lot about the Old Testament, the New Testament. I'm not too familiar with any of that stuff, like what takes place in what. You know, really, they kind of lay it out for you to let you know that these movies are about the Civil War taking place in heaven, and, you know, it kind of folds over into Earth. Really, what it's about is the human beings. The archangels don't like human beings. They don't like them at all.
Other angels have made this war because they hate you. You and all humans. God has put you in his grace and pushed them aside.
They want to rid them of the planet, while the angels, you know what? They see the human beings as a necessary, I guess, evil in a way. So the war is really over them. Christopher Walken plays the Archangel Gabriel. He plays that in The Prophecy 1, 2, and 3. And like I said, he's the glue that holds it together. In the first Prophecy movie, you know, he's kind of still playing the role kind of serious, pretty straightforward. We get those Walkenisms in there where, you know, he's kind of doing his own thing a little bit. There's a scene late in the movie where he's kind of going down. He's in a hospital going through the ICU, and he's looking at people's charts, and he's going, oh, man, gonna survive. Oh, close to death. That's what I like to see, because in these movies, and actually the first one that we see, Jerry, played by Adam Goldberg, you know, he was about to kill himself, but Christopher Walken brings him back to life. That's kind of his thing. Right as they're about to die, he can bring them back to life for a little while, basically to be his slave. They want to still die, and they keep saying it, which is really funny, because once Jerry does die, he brings back Amanda Plummer's character. Again, she was close to death, and she wants to die as well.
Don't do that.
So they're just looking to die. They're a lot like the Meeseeks in Rick and Morty, where, you know, they're not supposed to be alive that long, and it's starting to get pretty damn weird for these people. But Christopher Walken's got to keep him alive, mainly because he doesn't know what he's doing. Once we get to The Prophecy 2, they actually bring in Brittany Murphy to play this kind of character. Again, she was close to death. Christopher Walken brings her back to life, and the main reason is, A, he knows nothing about technology, which is some of the funniest stuff in the second Prophecy movie, is him trying to use a computer. It's just so confusing. That's honestly why I think The Prophecy 2 is the best of the 3 movies.
How do you think that works?
The first Prophecy movie, it's good because it's a straightforward thriller horror movie. It's kind of trying to take itself a little too seriously, but the acting is good enough. It's a well-made movie. It's entertaining, but, you know, it's nothing too special. It made $16 million at the box office, and that's why, you know, eventually they saw these movies as good enough to where they can go directly to video. The director, writer of the original one, who also wrote Backdraft, actually doesn't come back for the second and third movie. I think he's still a producer, but it's really not his baby anymore, and you can see the quality dip once we get to 2 and 3, and you can see in the second movie, they were just asking Christopher Walken to do Christopher Walken stuff, because he's really the only entertaining scenes in The Prophecy 2, but he does such a good job that it makes that movie just so overly entertaining and fun to watch. And, you know, it's not taking itself too seriously because it's a direct-to-video movie. You know, the acting really does take a pretty big dump from the first movie, so it's not as noticeable. But Christopher Walken's still doing his thing. He's still so funny. Like I said, the stuff with the technology of Brittany Murphy. Again, he can't drive. He's an archangel, but he can't drive. So he's going to he needs her to help him get along throughout the entire world. He's just hoping she doesn't die long enough before he could solve his problem of beating the angels. I didn't mention it, but in the first movie, we also got Viggo Mortensen playing Lucifer. Lucifer, which is pretty crazy. You'd think the war would be between heaven and hell, but no, the war's taking place in heaven. He's not getting involved in it until the very end of the first prophecy movie. And then, of course, we got to make sure we explain how Christopher Walken comes back in the second movie, how he comes back in the third movie. And really, the third movie, in this trilogy of movies, the third one is just, it's atrocious. It's a really, really, really bad movie. They brought Christopher Walken back, but he has a really small role, and they do the typical series thing as it's going along. You know, we got to try and make him seem more like the good guy now, whereas Gabriel, the entire trilogy, was the bad guy, and we loved him for that. And now trying to make him slightly, he's not really a hero, he's more of like an anti-hero, but, you know, he's kind of seen it all kind of thing is what they're laying out for you, and he's there to help the new main heroes, and he really takes a back seat, and the characters and the actors that they put to the forefront of the third movie, it just doesn't work. Some of the worst acting I've seen on film, a lot of noticeable green screen. Again, these are direct-to-video movies, so you don't really expect them to be the highest of quality. This stuff you usually would give a pass to, but because we're talking about them in beautiful new 4K Blu-ray, a lot of these flaws become more noticeable. I mean, the acting was always noticeably bad. These are actually the first time I ever saw these movies, so I didn't really have too high hopes for the third one, and they still didn't meet those expectations. But the Prophecy 1 and 2 are pretty damn solid movies. You know, not any movies that are going to blow you away, but they are at least very, very, very entertaining. And just for Christopher Walken, they're worth the watch. In the third movie, maybe if they had more Christopher Walken, it would have been a more entertaining movie. And obviously, like I said, the quality dip just because of, you know, the lack of money. That's going to be a real thing. But in the third movie, there is a couple things that kind of are the saving grace to make it at least somewhat watchable, as we actually do finally get to see some of the scenes in heaven, like talking about that civil war that we've heard about through the first two movies. You know, we get glimpses, but we actually get full-fledged scenes seeing what's going on up there. And I did appreciate that, but again, it's not enough to make that movie worth watching. Now that I've seen The Prophecy 1, 2, and 3, there was a 5-film Blu-ray collection that I originally was going to grab, but I don't think I need to see The Prophecy 4 and 5, especially since Christopher Walken isn't in those movies. And really, especially with The Prophecy 3, all I wanted to do was see Christopher Walken because everybody else was just doing a pretty damn bad job, in my opinion. I feel bad saying that, but I just think that the third movie is just not that good. The plot, you know, it makes sense like the other movies make sense. It's actually good enough, but it's nothing that's really the driving force of these movies. The characters are doing such a bad job that you don't really care about the plot of that movie, but I at least appreciated it somewhat. And, you know, these 4K Blu-rays that we're about to talk about, they do a pretty damn good job of making these movies look and sound really damn good. So the way these movies were at least made, there was some heart put into it. You know, there's documentaries talking about the making of these movies, and a lot of people did pour their heart and soul into them. So even if I don't think The Prophecy 3 is a good movie, and really isn't a good movie, I still appreciate that people did try with that movie. Christopher Walken, yeah, he did get a raise from The Prophecy 1 to 2, and I'm sure they paid him pretty well to The Prophecy 3. But Christopher Walken never really seems like he's funning in it. It looks like he's giving it his all, mainly because he's probably an appreciative actor, but still, it just doesn't work entirely for me, The Prophecy 3. But you should definitely check out the first two Prophecy movies, even if you don't want to check out these Vinegar Syndrome 4K Blu-rays that we're going to talk about right now.
Very good. Kevin.
Well, here it is, The Prophecy 1, 2, and 3 on 4K Blu-ray, courtesy of Vinegar Syndrome. And this was actually only the second Vinegar Syndrome 4K Blu-ray I picked up this year. I picked up Freeway earlier in the year, and then I picked this one up. Last year I said Vinegar Syndrome was the studio of the year. I felt like they were really firing all cylinders. They gave us a lot of mainstream movies like The Amityville Horror, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. They gave us Roadhouse on 4K and one of the best 4K Blu-rays ever released with all the works on it. So I had high hopes for Vinegar Syndrome coming into 2023. And other than Showgirls, nothing really stuck out to me. Freeway was a first-time watch. I absolutely love that movie. Really glad I picked that up. But nothing like really stuck out to me where I had to grab every Vinegar Syndrome 4K Blu-ray coming out this year. And the only reason I even picked this up was because of a subscriber here on the channel, Lord Rated, who told me to check out the Prophecy movies. And I swear to God, I was about to pick up the 5-film collection from Best Buy. It was like $15. And then they announced this for 4K Blu-ray. And then during their Black Friday sale, which is one of the best sales of the year, I decided to grab this one on 4K Blu-ray because the packaging also looked pretty damn badass in my opinion. So we'll start there. This is something I've never seen before. You slide this off, and it's like a little corner piece. You have to remove it. And now this doesn't pull off, so you just pull this off. This little pizza-shaped thing. You look on the side here, then you pull out the 4K. This is just a hard casing, a really nice hard casing. You get another slip cover over the actual 4Ks, so you slide that off. I had it upside down. And this is reversible cover art, so you could actually reverse it to look like the slipcover, or you could have it look like this. I prefer purple, always prefer purple in my opinion, so I chose to go this route. You come inside and you get the first film on 4K Blu-ray on its own. You get 2 and 3 on one disc together on 4K Blu-ray. Then you get The Prophecy on its own on Blu-ray, and that Blu-ray is going to include all of your extras. All of your extras for The Prophecy 1, 2, and 3 are on this second Prophecy Blu-ray, and then The Prophecy 2 and 3 are on Blu-ray on its own disc as well. So in total, it's a 4-disc set. You get The Prophecy on its own on 4K and on Blu-ray. That second Blu-ray is where all your extras are going to be. The Prophecy 2 and 3 are on its own 4K, and they're on its own Blu-ray. They're not separated from each other, so if you want to watch 3, it's going to be on the same disc as 2. They both have the same audio track. They have a DTS HD 5.1 and a 2.0, and that's the same thing for The Prophecy on 4K and on Blu-ray. So they all have DTS HD 5.1s, and they have 2.0s. The Prophecy 1 and 2 have commentary tracks, while the third one doesn't have a commentary track, and the commentary track for the first Prophecy is actually pretty good because the writer-director does it, and he was really passionate about making the first movie. It really was his baby. He wrote it because he wanted to direct. He was a writer before this. He had success as a writer, but he really wanted to direct, and it's really strange because he doesn't really work too much after the Prophecy movie, so I feel like he poured his heart and soul into that movie, and for some reason, I guess he was just done with it and he moved past it, but hearing him talk about the movie, it really is pretty damn cool, so that's a good commentary track. And speaking of the other extras, like I said, they're all on that Prophecy Blu-ray. There's actually a making of documentary for the Prophecy 1, 2, and 3, and they're all about an hour long. So that's the coup de grace of extras for me. I always love a good making of documentary because you really get everybody's mindset about making these movies. Maybe not as much from the actors, but the producers of these movies, the directors, like all of them, the cinematographers, all of them are talking about the making of these movies, and it really is pretty damn cool. I really did enjoy the fact that they actually have these 3 documentaries on here. You know, they didn't have to do that. They have a lot of promotional images as well. Like, that's the stuff you really need. I can see people being upset because there really isn't that much per se, but still, to get those documentaries, for me, I really think that's the mountaintop of extras. I guess some people might want a little bit more, but I mean, the first one is the only one that went to theaters, while the second and third one are direct-to-video movies. For them to give us a making-of for The Prophecy 3, for me, I really think that's surprising. Even have a commentary track for The Prophecy 2, which I think deserved it. Like I said, I think The Prophecy 2 is a really, really, really entertaining movie, and in a way, it probably is my favorite of these 3 movies, just because I was so entertained by it. And Brittany Murphy, she really is just a fantastic star. We lost her way too young. She really is fantastic in that movie. Again, her and Christopher Walken, for some reason, just have great chemistry. Enough about the movie itself. It's a good movie. Just check it out. But about the extras, I just think that they're really good, and surprising to me how good they are. And then also, again, while we're talking about the audio tracks are really good. I don't think they needed Atmos tracks. Maybe the first one, because the audio design is probably the best on the first one, but they do a good job with the mixes on the second and third one as well. Pretty good use of bass. Everything does come in crisp and clear, except the third one. The third one actually is probably the most flawed when it comes to the 4Ks in general. I had to adjust the volume a couple times while watching the third one because the dialogue was a little bit too low compared to everything else, but it was still mixed pretty well. And that's the same thing, honestly, when we get to the visuals. The visuals have HDR10, no Dolby Vision on any of these, just HDR10. And the Prophecy, the original Prophecy, looked incredible on 4K Blu-ray. Let me just tell you, it was a beautiful transfer. Vinegar Syndrome does do some of the best transfers out there, and this is another one that really is in line with some of their best transfers as far as visuals go. I mean, like I said, I never saw these movies before, so I don't know how they looked before this, but I was blown away by the visuals, hitting those deep blacks, the colors. These are very warm looking movies, a lot of like yellows and oranges, and it all works so well. And when you compare it to the pack in Blu-ray, you wouldn't think, okay, it's the same scan, it's not going to be that much of a jump, but it really is, especially in the brightness department. The 4K is so much brighter, that resolution increase is very noticeable, and the fact that it's brighter but it's still retaining that color, the color is just so much noticeably better on the 4K Blu-ray, and that's the color gamut thing. It is just so noticeable, the jump from the Blu-ray to the 4K, and that's the same thing with the Prophecy 2 and 3, but the Prophecy 2, it's the same thing. It's a big quality jump from the Blu-ray to the 4K. The 4K is stunning, maybe slightly worse than the first one, and that's just mainly because, you know, lower budget, so stuff just looks a little bit more artificial than it does with the first movie. That's really where all the money went, was to the first movie, but the 4K for the second one is still fantastic, and the 4K for the third one, same thing. That's the most flawed. You know, there's certain scenes in that where it looks a little bit too grainy, and there was a certain scene in the movie where it looked a little bit too muddy and just overly grainy, but it really wasn't that bad. It's just in comparison to the first 2 Prophecy movies, it was definitely a very slight quality dip in the third movie. So if you watch these all back to back to back, you'll notice more flaws in the third one. While I thought that the first film didn't have any any flaws when it came to the visuals or the audio. Other than that, maybe an Atmos track would have been nice. I also don't feel like it's necessary, but it's just the curiosity of it all. But overall, I really did think that these 4K Blu-rays were all pretty damn stunning. Vinegar Syndrome really knocked it out of the park when it comes to packaging. They probably did the best they could with the visuals on the third one. I could almost guarantee it's a source material thing. Then that's the reason why the third one looks worse than the first two. I'm sure that they put all of their effort into all three of these 4K Blu-rays. The audio is phenomenal. It's not the greatest audio I've ever heard, but they really put all their effort into it. And Vinegar Syndrome, like they always do, they pour their heart and soul into these movies. The people who make these movies and make these transfers, they're fans of the film, and it really does show on the quality of these discs. They really are just phenomenal. And if you're a fan of the Prophecy movies, yeah, definitely get these 4Ks, because I heard that those Blu-rays that came out were really, really low quality. That's probably why the 5-film set was only like $15. But man, this really is a great, great set. I will be revisiting the Prophecy 1 and 2 definitely in the future again, so I'm really glad to have these on 4K Blu-ray. The Prophecy 3, I'm probably one and done with that, and I don't really see any point in watching the Prophecy 4 and 5 unless you guys tell me it's that good of a movie and I have to check it out. But really, I think I'm pretty happy with just watching the Prophecy 1 and 2 again. So overall, how would I rate this on a score of 1 to 10? I would still give the Prophecy 4K Blu-ray box set from Vinegar Syndrome a really solid 9.5 out of 10. Obviously, these films' value is going to really depend how you feel about these movies, how you feel about horror movies, how you feel about religious horror movies. If you're not a fan of these types of movies, if you're not a Christopher Walken fan, there's probably no reason for you to grab these. But if you like the Prophecy movies, or these movies sound interesting to you, it's definitely worth it. It is pretty highly priced, but again, Vinegar Syndrome, they give us high quality product, whether it be on the disc or in the packaging itself. So it's probably worth it. And like I said, they have about 2 sales a year. If you could wait for those sales, it's definitely one that you should pick up in those sales, because it really is a great, phenomenal release. The only thing is when it comes to Vinegar Syndrome, you don't really get these really nice packaging unless you buy it on the initial release. Other than that, you'll probably just get and I think they are actually releasing this in January. You will just get this on its own without the slipcover, I'm pretty sure. So you'll just get this on its own with, without the bells and whistles of the packaging. But the disc quality is pretty good, and you'll get it at a cheaper price. So it is worth it if you want to wait for one of those sales. I can definitely recommend that. But if you want to grab this right now off their website, it's definitely also worth it, just because they really, really are high quality. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for being here with me on another episode of Let's Talk. And if you enjoyed this review, don't forget to hit that like button, hit that share button, turn notifications on, and then subscribe to the channel. And if you want to take your support of the channel to the next level, the best way to do that is becoming a channel member like our 2 producers, John Doe Juggalo and Jason Martin, or become a channel director like Kevin Kruger and Frank Rodriguez, and you can have your own individual review each and every month. And if you want, you can even have a private conversation with me. We also have a Friends of the Channel tier. That really does help to support us as well, so we can keep bringing you these 4K Blu-ray reviews. But if you got no money to toss away, don't you guys worry about that. We just appreciate any support that we can get, and I just want you guys to go out there and enjoy the rest of your day. And then after you're done doing all that, we'll be seeing you around.